Hi, this is Noelle Szydlyk with the Indiana Office of Tourism Development. We are excited to have those of you that are on the webinar today to learn more about bike trails and trail development and trail tourism specifically, and how we can better take advantage either of existing trails that are already in our areas and learn from some of our statewide experts on how to get your biggest impact from just two wheels. Just a little bit about myself. I'm the Director of Planning Development with over sport tourism and outdoor recreation for the Indiana Office of Tourism Development. Yes, that's a mouthful. One of the areas of focus for tourism from the state level is sports and outdoor recreation, and in our office, trails tourism, essentially cycling, as well as any other kind of tourism related around trails, falls under my area. So in addition to promotion of trails great and small here in Indiana, we've also taken on some responsibility along with the Indiana Department of Natural Resources over the administration of the Indiana Bike Trails Task Force. Some of you have been receiving our meeting notifications, and some of you have even attended our task force meetings here over the last 9 months. Those will continue for about another year, and we are continuing to move forward with that group. But there's a general statewide interest in trail development from the economic development standpoint, as well as for recreation and physical fitness, as well as tourism. And that's what led us to pulling together this great list of panelists today to do today's webinar. So we're going to get started. Before we do, we wanted to promote our next webinar. These will continue throughout the year. If you haven't looked at the list on our website, visit indianatourism.com. You can see that next one will be on agritourism with Kimmy Devaney from the Indiana Department of Agriculture. She's working with us on the growth of agritourism in Indiana and how we continue to promote that in communities across the state. Kimmy's great, and we hope you can join us in June, on June 5th for that webinar, or someone from your department or within your organization that might focus on food, culinary, agritourism. Our first speaker today, panelist, is Amy Marsalovich. Amy is a Streams and Trails Specialist with the Indiana Department of Natural Resources and is my go-to when it comes to statewide trails-related questions. She's got a wealth of information and is going to review different ways that you can activate trails within your own areas, whether you have a state park or a city park or a trail that connects from county to county. Amy's got some great information for you, so I'm going to pass this on. Amy will give you some direction you'll follow from the slides, and then we'll do some questions after that. And if you have questions, please feel free to submit them to us. Amy, go ahead.
Let's make sure we've got her unmuted.
There we go.
All right, Amy.
All right. Thanks, Noelle. Good morning. So bicycle tourism is an $83 billion industry in the United States. Yes, that's billion with a B. In our neighboring state of Michigan, their Department of Transportation has reported that bicycling events and vacations alone bring in $38 million annually to the state. And bicycling overall in the state has an economic impact of $668 million annually there. So although Indiana is certainly losing out some tourists to many of our neighboring states that have very advanced trail systems and bike tourism components, we still do have bicycle tourism here in Indiana, and I believe Indiana actually has an opportunity to get a bigger slice of that bicycle industry pie, as well as for that pie to even grow larger as bicycling continues to gain popularity. And in fact, later you'll hear from both Chris and Kent about some of the local efforts people are doing to attract bicycle tourists to their community. So as the first presenter, I wanted to focus on, I guess, some low-hanging fruit, the easy ways to promote bicycle tourism in your respective community. We all know that memorable Field of Dreams quote, if you build it, they will come. Well, that can be true for some things some of the time. Other times, it's necessary to promote and even improve the things already there to get people there. So I know that a lot of you work in the tourism industry, and so you do this on a daily basis. So this is no surprise to you. So why not apply this to bicycle tourism? So we're going to start where are people riding bikes? And how do I advance our slide there? So an easy way to promote bicycle tourism is, like I said, is to focus on where people are already riding bikes. And as you know, cyclists come in all shapes and sizes. They vary in what type of bikes they like to use, their age, their experience, their fitness level, and even why they ride. And so that dictates where they ride. So some of you may think you might know, where your cyclists are riding, but it depends on, is this a family pulling a trailer, or is this, the weekend warrior in total spandex? So just entirely dependent on the type of rider you have. So on the screen, we have a list of resources and interactive maps that can help you figure out where people are riding in your community. So our Indiana Trail Finder actually showcases both paved and natural surface, so single track mountain bike trails throughout the state of Indiana. So what's close by you or in your community. That might be, like I said, family friendly or gnarly single track, depending on where you are. Indiana also has 3 U.S. bike routes. You can find that information on INDOT's page. And so there are cyclists that are going cross country or cross state that might be going through your community that you may never even known about. There's also communities that have their own local bike routes that sometimes use road and sometimes use trails. A lot of these you can find out from your communities or from your local bike clubs or bike shops. The other really great resource, especially for things like bike lanes, bike-friendly roads, shared roads or sharrows, as well as trails, is Google Maps. If you don't know, there's a bicycling layer that you can actually put on Google Maps to see all of that bicycling infrastructure in your community. The last one is Strava, and it has a heat map. So it is showing where people are riding. This is kind of a self-reporting thing. This tends to be more of your endurance athletes and adrenaline junkies, but it's a good resource to see where people are riding a lot. So once you figure out where people are riding, you can start to think of ways to promote these to other like-minded people or to improve the experience for those using them. Examples of this can range from adding bike parking to places near the trail or these bike routes, wayfinding, marketing efforts such as pictures, videos, ads of people cycling in your community, working with your community and area cyclists to make a more official route. So maybe combining those trails or bike lanes or bike-friendly roads to make a 20-mile loop or 30-mile loop, or even a 10-mile family-friendly loop. The other ways we can do that, we also work with our local businesses and promote bike-friendly stops. This can be restaurants or breweries, or even itineraries of, where to stop along the trail or where to stop along the bike route. And lastly, we can even create maps and guides to help people navigate our community. It's a lot more user-friendly if they know where they're going and if they do less work. One great example is the one here from Brown County. So the Brown County, Indiana Mountain Biking Guide has a detailed list of all of the trails and other nearby opportunities, and as well as opportunities to do things outside of biking once you get done, where to get a bite to eat, where to go shopping, that kind of thing. So making it a lot easier for the tourists to figure out what to do and how to have a great time quickly. So the other easy way to promote bicycle tourism in your community is to go through existing events. This can be bike-related events or general community events. So if you're not sure what bike events are already going on in your community or even through your community, Bicycle Indiana's resource guide usually has a great listing of rides by month for the entire state. So you can see if, like I said, the ride starts, finishes, or goes through your community. The 2018 guide should be out shortly, but there's a link to their website, and as you can see, the pictures of their 2017 guide. The guide also has a listing for a lot of the state's bike shops and bike clubs, many of whom host or organize weekly, monthly, or annual rides. Those are pretty easy to tap into once you find out the right contacts. So that resource guide can help you find out those contacts in your community if you don't already know them. The last really good resource to find out about rides is through your local Parks and Restoration Department or your trail managers. They also host and organize rides. A great example would be Muncie Bike Fest, which Cardinal Greenway helps promote. So you can help with these rides through traditional marketing, pairing with local businesses to offer specials for these events, helping with the swag bag, or even hosting a post-ride party. A ride is all about the experience, so if you can help to improve the experience and really put your community's best foot forward to these cyclists, you'll see more return riders for these events, as well as new ones via word of mouth. And you might also see repeat riders coming back to your community, not during those rides. Growing the event, especially with additional activities around that bike ride, can also mean that the rider's spending more time in your community. That might be making more hours there, so they might want to get food or a drink afterwards, spend the night. So that's also a great thing if you can really bolster those events. The other way that you can easily promote bicycle tourism is to incorporate bicycling into your existing events and attractions. This includes fairs, festivals, farmers markets, guided tours, things like that. Easy way to do that is add bike parking. I know Carmel has done a great job by adding bike parking to things like Parks and Recs events, to their farmers market, and it really makes it an experience to do that as a social thing. Biking can also connect attractions that might be too far to walk. For example, Indiana Landmarks has done bicycling tours where they connect historic landmarks or attractions that might be too far to see otherwise. You can even incorporate bike rides into the event as a program activity. And so that adds to the kind of experience of that festival or fair or anything else that you have, having an additional activity option. And the other thing that's really great about adding biking to existing events is it really helps market to maybe a non-traditional cyclist and show them how easy it can be, and helps you reach a new audience as far as bicycle tourists. So I hope you start thinking about kind of easy ways that bicycle tourism can be added in your community. Just final thought before I hand it off to Kent is that bicycling forces people to slow down and notice more. There's a phenomenon in outdoor recreation that we call walking or rolling wallets. And it shows that people that are using active transportation or who are out recreationally are statistically more likely to stop into small businesses and spend money. Biking also usually makes people happy. I think that's mostly because of the fresh air and endorphins. And it also can tire people out, make them hungry and thirsty. And I don't know about you guys, but these are exactly the type of people that I want visiting my community as far as tourists, people that want to eat, drink, shop, and stay the night. So that's all I have for you guys. I think we have the opportunity for you guys to ask a few questions.
Well, Amy, this is Noelle. To get started, I'm going to pick your brain. That was awesome information. For this group as well, I want to have you give us some feedback on using your expertise related to if a visitors bureau or a chamber is looking to develop a new trail project, what is really their first starting point? Whether that's gathering funding sources, developing a steering committee, do you have recommendations on getting their route together? What might be that first step in creating a trail, whether it's in their community or one that crosses their, whole county, large or small.
Yeah, the first step is definitely to gather those stakeholders who would be interested in seeing the development, helping with the development, helping with the management. So again, that can be tourism bureaus, that can be parks and recreation departments, both county and local. It might even be nonprofit groups, local, like you said, cycling groups. A lot of health groups are also really good partners in this. So a variety of agencies, and that'd be the first step. And the next step is to look for viable options for a route.
Okay. That's awesome. I did want to comment, for those of you that might be trying to voice a question, the easiest way for you to do it on here is to submit them through the chat area on your computer. So if you're following along with the slides, please submit your questions in that location, either for Amy or any of our panelists today, and then we will get those, we'll pull those up and ask them on your behalf. It just makes things flow a little bit easier. One other question I have for you is, what's sort of the number one pitfall for organizations that are trying to start a trail project?
Ooh, yeah, I think that the number one pitfall probably would be to assume that this is a quick process. Most of the time, trails aren't built overnight. It takes a while, and so just learning to have that patience of everything from getting the funding to finding the route, getting permission for that route, having an organization that will take care of it. That it's a timely process. It's a worthwhile process, but I think that's probably the number one pitfall, is just assuming this can be done fairly quickly.
Very good. For those of you that might have additional questions for Amy, please again submit them through the chat. We're going to have time to go back to all of our panelists at the end. We are going to move forward to Kent and get him on board with us here right now. So just to give you a little introduction, Kent Castleman is another one of our panelists. He is the Executive Director for Fort Wayne Trails. Fort Wayne has some great projects going on in the downtown, and Kent's going to give us some of his feedback from a advocacy group, not-for-profit group side of things, as opposed to a state agency like the Indiana Department of Natural Resources. So Kent, you're up. You're still muted. Hold on. There you go.
There we go. Thank you for having me this morning. Appreciate that. Yes, that's good. No, I love hearing all the conversation around how it all connects together, because for sure, before you can have tourism, you have to have the trails themselves and be working on that plan. And so our organization actually assists in helping vision for what those trails can look like. And our mission as an organization is to be a partner and advocate for trail development. And specifically, we say for a multi-purpose connected trail system here in Allen County. Many times when trails are getting developed and started, you'll see various segments that get built, and sometimes those aren't necessarily connecting together. And obviously, when you start to have an interconnected trail system, that's when you really start to see the benefit for connecting those destination points for visitors to the community, and even the residents having destination points to and from to add to that commerce and add to what's going on from an economic standpoint. Our organization was actually founded in 2011 from the merger of 3 different grassroots nonprofits here in Allen County. We actually had a pretty early start with our trail development back in the mid-'70s. There was a group of citizens, and citizens have really led our trail development from the beginning. They wanted to see trails along our River Greenway, and that currently exists as a 26-mile stretch. And then they wanted to see the plans for that was to go all the way through Northeast Indiana, which I'll talk about a little bit in some of the visioning that were there. But engaging citizens has been very important, and a very important part of the process for everything that happened here in Fort Wayne and in Allen County. We currently have 107 miles of trail in Allen County. 81 of those are in the city limits of Fort Wayne, and the other balance there falls into the other cities and towns. and approximately 85 miles of those are interconnected, so people can get to and from those destinations using the trail system. And a little connection there to some of the tourism here, even in Fort Wayne. We have a couple hotels that actually sit on the trail system, and they have actually taken initiative themselves to actually have a couple bikes in storage that guests can use whenever they are here. So as you're talking about partnering with businesses for that tourism, it's important that people have access to bikes. Of course, bike shares are always a possibility, and we're developing. We started a bike share here a couple of years ago, but we're developing a different bike share this year that's going to be a little more user-friendly from an access standpoint. And so having those resources available for visitors is important. Now, when you get the serious tourism, obviously they're bringing their own equipment because they're, want to make sure they have the best that they can have. But when you're talking about, just general conventions and people potentially interacting with your community in a certain way, having those resources and things available is important too. So my last point here is that we kind of act as a county convener and a project coordinator for the cities and towns outside of Fort Wayne and our rural communities. We also obviously work with the city of Fort Wayne, but they are very focused on everything in the city limits of Fort Wayne. And since they have a staff person who's dedicated to working on that, we want to make sure that we're also connecting when we get to the city limits. And there are other suburbs and communities outside of Fort Wayne that we want to make sure that are connected in. As was kind of mentioned earlier about, how do you get a trail project off the ground and some of those kind of things, we are a convener of those people, and from that standpoint, we help vision where those trails are going to go and how that work is going to be done as we connect those different trails together. We also want to keep those of you that are trying to get people to use them aware of the projects that are happening. Here in Fort Wayne specifically, we have the Greenways Department is actually underneath the Board of Public Works, not under Parks and Recreation. So you want to make sure that you check in your various communities because sometimes it's not always intuitive as to where it would be. A lot of times trails start out as Parks and Recreation, and then they move, as they are here in Fort Wayne, into more of an active transportation network. So it's also about local citizens and their connectivity and interconnectivity to one another as well. But back when we're talking about, visitors, there's a couple initiatives that we have here that goes to more of my slide here. Our website, fwtrails.org, has interactive maps that are located on that. We are actually in the middle of an upgrade of that website to interact with a new app that we have going. So our mapping is going to go through transition in the next month or so here as well for the new season. But having that information available is very important, and we print 75,000 maps annually as well. That is it's a fundraising tool that we use for our nonprofit, but it also gets those maps then in the hands of the end trail users or the visitors that are coming in, so they understand how to know and connect to the closest trailhead or access point for the trail. And the new app that we're going to be launching is going to be specific to Fort Wayne trails, and it will be a point-to-point mapping system so people can select where they're at, pick their end destination. We'll show them the safest route. The first version of this will not have turn-by-turn directions, but we're hoping to continue working with our local university. We had our local university, Indiana Tech, is actually using their computer science students to actually develop that app for us in cooperation with a local marketing firm here. And so it was just a great way for us to pull partners together to make that work. And then, of course, Visit Fort Wayne is a good partner for us, and the trails are covered every year in their city guide and things to do in the city. We know that whenever conventions are coming into town, those maps become important as a way for us to showcase the trails and connectivity to those. In 2017, we had a recorded 580,000 uses of our trails here in Fort Wayne. In Allen County, we have 14 actual counters out. And now we're trying to connect with those so we can actually start to understand from those trail users, how are they spending money when they're out in the system? So when we talk about that economic impact, what does that look like? And so those users are going to be very important to interact with as we go. The one thing that's interesting in our role, we actually do not own or operate the trails. That is, from the beginning, a task that they have given specifically to the municipalities in which they're built. So if it's right in the city limits of Fort Wayne, then Fort Wayne is responsible for the maintenance and operation of those trails. Now, we obviously help with the face of it if we're going to be doing the social media and the maps and things along those lines. We are involved in a lot of that, but we really concentrate on getting more trails on the ground and making sure that those municipal partners are setting aside annual allotments, that they are planning new trails, and more importantly, as new development happens in our county, that we are sitting at the table with our plan commission and looking at the plans that are submitted by developers to make sure there is connectivity to the trail system. And sometimes it's not always a trail that can be built, but making sure that there is sidewalks and or side paths or bike lanes on the road that are connecting to those trails so it does move people to them. We kind of concentrate on three different levels. We are mainly a local advocacy organization concentrating on the city and the county and the other municipalities. We also partner regionally. So we are working on an exciting project up here in Northeast Indiana. That's an 81-mile trail that would stretch between two state parks, from Pokagon State Park up in Angola, that's in Steuben County, down through DeKalb, through Allen County and Fort Wayne, and end up in Bluffton at Wabash State Park. And that trail is going to be called the Pokabash Connector. Of the 81 miles between the four counties, 30 miles are already created. Now we just have to work how to get through the county stretches. As you can imagine, the development around the urban core is pretty easy, but getting through the county stretches sometimes can be hard. So that's actually going to require us now to start having some state level advocacy. If we are really truly looking at these as tourism, then we need to also start looking at what state resources, in addition to the DNR and some of the existing pots, what are some other resources that they can put in to truly make this 81-mile stretch a reality in Northeast Indiana and be really an attraction for the whole nation to come and use. And so that resource development leads into the last point here of fundraising, that we are an organization that exists to access those private dollars and to communicate and work with local foundations and even corporations to contribute to the trails. And we're going to continue growing that side of our organization as well. So as you can see, we play a little different role in the work that we do, but it ultimately relies on partners like you all in the tourism industry and local government to really truly make it happen. So we thank you for your time and energy in making this work too.
Thanks, Kent.
Yep.
We did get a question from one of our listeners. First question that came in is, how do you track trail use?
So we have, there are 14 infrared trail counters that are on our system, and we're hoping to add 4 or 5 more this year. And they are just out at the various places that we know receive the most use on the trail. And it just, it's a single beam that goes across, and it just measures every time the beam is impacted, then it's another trail user that's been counted. And so that's one of the main ways. We do have some other, anecdotal programming and things along those lines that we do with our Trek the Trails program, where we can get as many as 150 to 200 unique individuals that interact through that program. But mainly it's through those infrared counters.
And do you feel like your app will be able to allow you some additional data collection?
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're working on all that too, in what can be there. And you pointed earlier too to the Strava maps, and those Strava maps have been important as we assess where, investment needs to be made in the system and where connectivity isn't, if we see it on the Strava map as being, kind of a hotter spot that we see people using, they might be using roads or other infrastructure to reach other sections of trail. That definitely adds into giving us data to support development.
Very good. I have one other question for you from my end. as an advocacy organization for trails in your community, how do you work with your local city officials? You mentioned a little bit about being sort of at the table with new development, but in addition to that, promoting new projects and or going to city council meetings, whatever the case is. How are you guys engaged in those processes as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Our staff are available, and we're a little unique in that we are a separate nonprofit that exists here in Allen County specifically for trail development. And then there's 2 full-time staff in the city that work on that, and then we have a connection into our county highway. But there's 5 people that wake up every day to think about how can we grow and develop the trail system, and that's important because we can be at the table. But the most important piece that we do, and the way we're trying to grow too, is to get then those citizen users to then engage with the elected officials. So I can sit at the table all day long and talk about trails, and there's support. But if you had 25 people write a city councilman and say, this trail segment really needs to happen, and this is the reason why, and how it's going to impact my quality of life, and especially, if you're any of the tourism agencies, you also have sway in that. And so your support for trail projects and writing letters to elected officials, thanking them for investment, and then also asking for future investment or continued investment is important. So I'd say the number one thing that we help do is to engage the citizen activation too.
We have another question that came in from the listeners. Do you have any specific recommendations on working with your county and state counterparts to expand your trails beyond your city limits? So in those areas where you're advocating beyond Fort Wayne, out in the county?
So we are actually talking with Wells, DeKalb, and Steuben counties in our area. Since we're the nonprofit that exists for trail development, we are actually looking to get citizen groups started in each of those counties as well. Because I can't, it really doesn't, I guess it's supportive for me to go into DeKalb County or Steuben County and say, hey, we'd love for you to connect to Fort Wayne. But if you have local people who are doing that, that's important. So we're actually concentrating on building grassroots organizations in those counties who then can be local people who are advocating to local elected officials to help make that happen. And so those are, definitely get involved in that way. But, letting elected officials know that you use them is key too, because some people take them for granted, especially up here that we're getting more and more. Everybody just assumes that, it's fully 100% owned and operated by the city. And while they do own and operate them, it takes a lot of citizens and groups like ours that are actually helping make them continue to grow.
Okay, well, thank you, Kent. We will again continue to monitor the questions. So if those of you that are sending them in, if you have other ones, please feel free to add them to the chat. We're probably going to have some time at the end to go back to a few things. So, but we're going to give Chris, our next speaker, Chris Dressel, from the city of South Bend, who works with the Department of Community Investment and is the planner and bicycle coordinator. Chris, I think, even has more titles than this. We just included these few on here, and we appreciate his involvement in what's happening up in South Bend. So tell us more.
Yeah, thanks so much, Noelle, and thanks for the opportunity to participate in this very informative webinar. Good morning, everyone. Happy to really talk about what's happened in South Bend. I think we've got some similar themes that you've heard, but I think we can offer some specific information about what some of the progress that's happened in South Bend. And of course, some of this boils down to a plug to come visit us. If you haven't been to South Bend, even in a couple of years, I think you'll be really fascinated to see some of the great changes we've made in our downtown. My position as bicycle coordinator, I think I've been in that position since 2009. I'm the first and so far the only bike coordinator for the city of South Bend, and we've seen some great evolution evolution in terms of tangible growth in our trail system, in terms of developing partnerships and just in terms of getting a wider array of folks in terms of ages and abilities to get on two wheels and get around the city. Going back, just a little background, I think going back to 2007, I think we made a tangible effort with the city administration to start to build our bicycle network. Up to that point, we really just had a spine of trails that were paralleling the St. Joseph River, and really not much to speak of in terms of bicycle lanes or shared bicycle routes within our street network. And one of the great things we had in South Bend, and maybe we'll attribute it to the founders of the city, but we have a lot of redundancy in our streets, which provides a lot of quiet neighborhood, calm streets that are great for biking. So we're able to take advantage of that. So over time, we were able to build our bicycle network, and what that's resulted in is I think an improved network, and we've also made a whole variety of leaps and bound improvements in the city, ranging from wayfinding to better connections with the University of Notre Dame and that population, sort of a refocus on the St. Joseph River and its importance to the city, to residents, also to attracting tourists and visitors. And then on board of becoming one of the first communities in the whole country to take on dockless bike share. It was our first bike share, and that's been an exciting, really not even a year yet, but it's been an exciting time for us. So wanted to cover some of those items in more detail. South Bend's been a bike-friendly community, as recognized by the League of American Bicyclists since 2010. We were the first in northern Indiana to get on board in that area. We have, again, through a decade-long effort, we've looked to make improvements to our bike network and make connections. I think that's what it comes down to when folks are looking to, when you're trying to increase the usage. This will be familiar to a lot of folks on the call, that you want to connect your destinations, right? So that meant making connections to downtown, University of Notre Dame area, St. Joseph River, and other destinations. One of the key things key themes that we've employed as of late, we've become really a complete streets community, and that means let's look at other users on the street, not just the motor vehicles. So that includes bicyclists, of course, and make the community more bikeable, more walkable. So what we've done is, through the brand of Smart Streets, we've added our first protected bike facilities in the downtown, and these are connected to our major tourist destination within the downtown, and help connect to others, including our parks, to our universities and other colleges, and to our major other regional attractions, which include the Potawatomi Zoo area. We are, as I noted, looking back to the St. Joseph River and as an opportunity to better employ those connections, and that includes making some upgrades to existing facilities. Some of our paths and trails are getting a little old in the tooth. They're probably up to 3-4 decades old, so there's a chance to upgrade those and make better connections to our amenities that are adjacent to the river, and that includes some of our major historic, most popular parks. And we are doing that through a community-led process, through our Riverfront Parks and Trails plan. We will see implementation over the next couple of years that will serve to upgrade those areas, but also put in some new connections that hadn't been there before, to offer some comfort and I think some better connections to destinations. And then we're very proud of our dockless bike share that's provided by Lime Bike. It's funny, when you become one of the first communities to take on dockless bike share, you're a de facto expert on that subject very quickly, because you have folks from across the country sort of calling you and asking you about what it means. And we had been looking to take on bike share for some time. We had become a little bit stale in just having bikes available. We did not have any bike rental, and we knew that the recreation and tourism opportunities would be sort of immediate, and they have been. I think a lot of folks just taking, when you can take that out of the equation and, ask, when people are coming to South Bend to visit, you don't need to bring a bicycle. We've already got them. So that's great to have. And we've seen a lot of really a spectacular, I think, adoption of this service in just a short period of time. We now have over 1,200 bikes and over 200,000 rides in just the first 6 months. That was July of last year through January of this year. So that made us, suddenly we went from having no bike share to having the largest bike share in the state of Indiana. It's really, really, really fantastic growth there. And I think that's given us opportunities for just generally to get better personal mobility for any reason for a lot of folks. And we've seen, as you might guess, once the University of Notre Dame came on board, it was really a very popular mode of transportation for those moving around the campus, whether they be students, staff, or faculty. And then obviously for those that were looking to visit the campus or to move from the campus to other destinations in the city. We actually, as you might guess, some of the most popular ride days that we've had have been on Notre Dame football weekends, where on those game days we achieved between 3,000 and 4,000 rides a day, which is pretty fantastic. And really tested the system, gave it an early test, is what we wanted to see that test and see how the dockless bike share responded. I think with only a couple exceptions, I think we did pretty well in providing that, again, offering that mobility for those that are visiting the area. And I think what we found is, I think maybe dockless bike share may be the future, and we're in some ways we're fortunate to find a provider that works with us well and is communicative and responsive to the needs as we've grown through the process. And I think the last thing I wanted to leave you with is just a good slide that sort of shows what's happened in South Bend as far as it being transformative. If you look at the left, we'll get there. Look between the left and the right. This is what's happened on what's actually Martin Luther King Drive. It's listed there as St. Joseph. That was the former name. But if you look at the left, what we had previously, we had a coupling of one-way streets that moved traffic through quickly, and this was a priority back in the 70s when those were that were in charge and wanted to see South Bend to keep up with other communities. But over time, it sort of became a divider and sort of a river of traffic that made it difficult to traverse for biking or walking. And if you look on the right-hand side, you'll see what the result is. It's fairly fantastic change here. We've been able to narrow the street as we converted it to two-way. We've done this on both Martin Luther King Drive and Main Street, the former major one-way couple that went through the downtown. And it gives us extra space, right? So with that extra space, we were able to add a protected two-way cycle track and a buffer as well. We added some more parking, and really were able to provide a bike facility that was immediately adjacent to the river as you went to the north. And I think no one was necessarily keeping track of the number of people that were using the sidewalk that was adjacent to the river, but I think we'll assume that was somewhere near zero on most days. And so we're able to bring something that essentially wasn't there before and provide a connection, as I mentioned earlier. I think that's the key. You want to build confidence in the user, especially someone that's coming to South Bend for the first time, that we have safe and comfortable routes in our downtown that connect our downtown destinations, and I think over time we'll extend that comfortable aspect to some of our major destinations, including the University of Notre Dame area. And then the last thing to note in these photos, you'll see that the building in the foreground that was under construction when these pictures were taken in the late summer is a courtyard by Marriott that just opened up in the last couple of weeks. And if you add that to the Aloft Hotel that's just outside the shot on Main Street, in the existing DoubleTree, we've basically tripled the number of hotels in our downtown just in a matter of months. And this is my understanding, and I think it's been about 30 years or so since we've had 3 hotels in the downtown. So it's pretty exciting. And these are all hotels that are immediately adjacent to these new protected bicycle facilities, and all within a short walk, if not within visual distance of an available Lime bike as a dockless service. These are bikes that can be found via an app that basically has a GIS location for each of the bikes. And I think the downtown is always very popular when it comes to the Lime bike service, and there's always Lime bikes available at most corners. So we think that's an immediate attraction, again, for those that are looking to make their way around South Bend on 2 wheels. I will leave you with a couple of sort of regional approaches that are occurring. One is a recent happening. For those that are familiar with Northwest Indiana, we do have the South Shore Line, which is a sort of a century-old interurban electric train that connects between Chicago as the far west destination and South Bend as the east destination, a lot of communities in between. They have started allowing bikes in dedicated parts of the train for the first time last year. And so that is, I think, a great opportunity to tap into the greater Chicago area cycling population. And something that we anticipate will be largely completed before the end of this year as another regional opportunity is there is what we call the Indiana-Michigan Trail, or the St. Joseph River Valley Trail, which actually connects Michigan and Indiana. And it's possible to travel, I think, at the end of this year when you get a couple of key sections complete outside of South Bend. You can travel between the city of Niles, city of South Bend, and the city of Mishawaka, connecting all of those downtowns. It's about a 20-mile one-way trip. And I think that's really another fantastic way to attract those that are looking to travel by bicycle and make maybe a day or a weekend event out of it. So I want to leave some time for questions for everyone else. So again, happy to be part of it and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Chris. I have a specific question for you, and then I think we'll pop back to a few other folks because we did have a few other come in after Kent finished up. How are you tracking your most popular Lime bike locations and like user groups? Is it specifically related to if there's events going on, i.e. a Notre Dame football game, and do you move bikes into specific locations to accommodate where you know there's going to be extra usage?
Great question. I think this is something we've gained more information as time has gone on. I think initially we were using the app, which, as with anyone that logs in, they'd have a chance to see where the bikes are located. And so we started to draw some inferences from this and this wasn't surprising. I think what we're seeing is there's a lot of bikes found. It's where we have a triangle. We have the greater Notre Dame area, the South Bend downtown, and then the IU South Bend, Potawatomi Zoo area. Seems to be where the bikes are often located, so we're able to see that on the app. In more recent months, Lime Bike has developed a dashboard that gives us a day-to-day tracking of data, basically showing the number of rides and users. And then really, as of this morning, we just got an updated version of that dashboard, and I haven't had a chance to really digest it at all, but there's now, it gives us a sense of where, much like the Strava app works, we can now get a sense of what routes folks are using to get from place to place, which I think will be fantastic for us as we're able to develop additions to our bicycle network. In terms of the user groups, I think we have a way, just based on the, anyone that joins with an EDU address, email address, we're able to track what percentage of the total user population is from EDU addresses, and we see that there's about 25% or so are in that area. Otherwise, we're finding, and some of this is, again, maybe I'll get more information soon, but some of this is just anecdotal, but I think we're seeing a lot of folks at two different poles. Some are on the recreational pole, I think just looking out to take maybe an evening or a weekend ride to some of our destinations, our parks and trails. But I think we're also seeing, just as importantly, a lot of folks that are using Lime Bike for personal mobility. This is their best transportation option on any given day. We're seeing the bikes located at places of business, places of commerce, even big box stores and things like that. So and we're excited, but that's something it's an outcome that we wanted to see from adopting bike share into the community.
And how do you promote the Lime Bike program to visitors? Is it strictly through through Visit South Bend, Mishawaka, or do you guys do something as part of the city to do that as well?
We have connections through Visit South Bend, Mishawaka. We have, and I didn't include that link, we have a Bike South Bend page at southbendin.gov/bike, where we try to include a lot of our bike happenings. But I think we're really just starting to tap into how we can better promote Lime Bike and sort of widen the potential audience. It's been really fantastic how many people have adopted the service with little or no promotion. But I think as we want to grow that group, I think we've got a lot of opportunities to increase those promotional outlets.
Excellent. Well, I think that is great. As we wind down with time, I'm going to get one last question in here that came in from a person that's listening. I think this is directed at Kent, but Chris, you might be able to answer as well. What economic impact or property values can you connect to trail development? Kent, specifically, I was going to ask the same question sort of about trail tourism and getting city officials to buy in. It draws along that same line. Do you see economic impact as a not a positive, of course it's a positive, but as a reason for people to push a trail project? And then have you been able to see actual dollar values attached to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's been several studies done on that. And I think one of the most significant was one done actually on the Monon Trail in Indianapolis and in connections to adjacent property owners. There's definitely a direct correlation to increased property values and economic impact that way. So then obviously that's creating more tax dollars from that perspective. It is a very hard thing to quantify though. And so we are struggling with that a little bit, but it's definitely an indicator. And what we're seeing around here is a few anecdotal things that we have real estate firms that are now calling to inquire about where trails are going and understanding where trails are going to be, specifically because they have clients who are looking for homes that are definitely located in neighborhoods that connect, but more and more they're getting homeowners who want homes that are directly on the trail system. So more people want to walk out their back door and hop on the trail. And so that's actually driving some of those parcels and properties up further. From a commercial development standpoint, we are definitely seeing more commercial development, restaurants and things along those lines that are talking and developing along the trail system as well.
Yeah. Hey, Amy, do you know what that name of that study was that was done on the Monon Trail? You always seem to know what these things are.
Well, the most recent study is actually always done on the Indianapolis Cultural Trail, which they saw property values go up 148%. That study was done in 2016, so just after the Cultural Trail, or so it was 2015 maybe, when the Cultural Trail was just finished. So 148%, and some other kind of resources if people do have interest in learning about the economic impact of trails, whether that's from a real estate component or public health or just consumer consumption. Headwaters Economics, so headwaterseconomic.org/trail actually has a database, and you can search for all types of different trail studies, and that includes, they do have studies on economic development and all aspects of economic development, including property value. So I'm happy to share that link with any of the users that might be interested.
And if I can jump back in,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, definitely. I had that mixed up. It was on the Cultural Trail. I was speaking about the same.
No problem.
The same study, so that's good. But yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I had another thought, but it's escaped me now. So go ahead.
All I was going to say, we don't have any other questions from the participants. And Kyle's really likes to get you guys in and out of here on time. First, I want to thank our panelists for your participation today. Every time I talk to folks about trail development and or trail tourism, I learn something. So I appreciate the opportunity to be on this as well. We will be posting this so that folks can come back and listen to it later if they were unable to do so today, or if you have, for those of you that are listening, if you have folks that you want to share this with, you are welcome to share that as well. Again, panelists, you are welcome to do so too. We have the rest of our webinars planned for the remainder of the year. We mentioned the one on June 5th on agritourism, and then they're about every 2 months. We have another one coming up in August about travel and golf. In October, we're going to focus on film in Indiana and how that affects our tourism industry. And then in December, we will be coming back to the trail topic again, but really to focus as you develop trails on safety, whether that's creating a location that's safe for users, but also how you deal with issues that could be related to the safety on a trail. Everybody's seen different aspects of how it can be good and bad. And we'll be bringing a panel together again for that. Hopefully you can join us for that one in December. So thank you to everyone. Thanks, panelists. And we are going to sign off. If you have any further questions for our panelists, their information is on the slideshow, their email. But if you want to direct those questions to me or to Kyle Johnson from our office, we will be sure to get those out to the respective folks, just so we don't fill up your inboxes. Thank you all, and have a wonderful rest of the week.